The past few weeks, Jon has taken us down the predatorial rabbit hole of discussing how an innocent child could possibly grow up to be a violent sexual deviant, a psychopath, a pedophile, or all three. And the information has been received so well by all of you. On the opposing end, Jon has also simultaneously been going through a chart explaining the parts that make up a survivor system, and it's been an incredible balance of getting insights into both sides of the abuse spectrum. In order for us to evolve as a society, we have to be willing to get uncomfortable and talk about these uncomfortable topics. We have been deprived in our education of being informed about trauma, perpetrators, and abuse. And we live in a time now where people are so disconnected from their bodies, brains, and hearts that they are living in a state of trauma without even realizing it. When we can come to terms with understanding abuse, understanding why someone might become an abuser, and understand how we can heal from abuse, then we can start to tip the needle into a societal state of healing where we can begin to intentionally mend generational trauma cycles. And luckily for us, we have an amazing guest with us every Tuesday night who has both worked with the most deviant sexual offenders in solitary confinement and who has also spent decades helping to learn about and heal survivors of the worst kinds of abuses perpetrated by these same sexual deviants. I personally feel so grateful and honored to have Jon here with us each week, piecing together the puzzle surrounding trauma and healing. And if you enjoy this episode today, please go check out Jon's playlist on my channel and watch each video and share with others who may also find value. In typical Jon Uhler fashion, you're going to be learning so much today, so please grab a pen and paper and get ready for our weekly therapy session on the imagination. Jon, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Emma, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back with you. And you do this multiple times with guests, and so you are writing paragraphs on every single guest. So thank you.
Yeah, I think, for me, I'm like a big picture person. So I always read captions before I go watch an episode. And I figure that there's people like me out there that would like to know what we're going to talk about. But really the main reason why I do it is because I know how hard it is to talk about this stuff. I know when you put your face out there and you talk about this, that you get a lot of negative feedback. There's not a lot of people that are, especially I'm sure decades ago, whenever you started stumbling on this, it's not something that survivors or whistleblowers hear all the ways that they're benefiting the world. We get trolled a lot, we get bullied. So it's kind of a gift that I'm able to give to sort of invert that back the way it should be. You guys should all be honored by everybody, and I'm just sort of manifesting the future. I can't wait till, you're on a freaking stage talking about this and getting an incredible intro, and it's just a very small token of appreciation that I can do for the time that you're spending here with me and with us tonight. So I really appreciate you, Jon, the work that you do. And it can't be understated enough how important this has been and, how good this is for our community to have somebody like you on our side out here advocating for survivors and, sharing these truths that not many in your field are ready or willing to talk about. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. And it's a pleasure to be with you again. And to those that have been staying with us, they're to be commended as well, because this part that we've been doing, we kind of hung a sharp right, sort of, as we're talking about the parts. We're going to get back to that starting next week.
Yay.
This is hard, but I think necessary for purposes of insight, for purposes of, as you and I were talking before we started recording, this will really help with unpacking and dismantling what has come to be known as trauma bonding. And that is a key part of helping a survivor heal, because ultimately the goal is to be free to choose, free to have a voice, free to have a preference, free to believe that I can start to have hopes and dreams and goals. But if I believe I've been cursed, if I believe there are, metaphorically, that there's hooks and cables or ropes on me, bungee cords that only allow me to get just so close to the goal and then I get snatched back, or that there's a black cloud hanging over my head, then how's that for a life? That means at best you're consigned to, and this is what every survivor, especially of SRA or MK Ultra, They believe that ultimately, no matter what they want, the opposite is going to happen, or they can only have a smidgen of what they want, or by the time they've set their goals, they're just getting down to the end zone. They're getting to the 2-yard line and something happens more powerful than them to snatch the ball away. And then they fumble. And you do that enough times, you're going to get to a point where you say, why am I even going to do this? It feels like the game is rigged. So that's what this is all about. We are, just like your prayer, we are demolishing strongholds. By the way, the Greek word for strongholds is the same word as prisons. And what are those? Those are thoughts. Those are beliefs. And my beliefs can either help me or hinder me, depending upon if they are reality-based, meaning if they are genuinely grounded in truth. All people need, ultimately, in order to be set free, is the truth. And the truth will do its work. But if I've come to believe something to be a lie, if I've come to believe something to be true, but it's a lie, then I'm believing wholeheartedly as though something is true. But it's not. And so there's this barrier, and I'm never going to go past it. It's like that elephant that we talked about. How do you subdue an elephant and make it docile? You start with a chain, you put it around that, right, around the foot, and you do a big stake in the ground. And so not a stake, but an iron stake. And the elephant pulls and pulls, and it can't get loose. And so it begins to become convinced that why fight, which is true if you can't. But then the owner knows all it has to do is have a little tiny wood stake and a little piece of a little rope. And because it feels familiar, the elephant just assumes because of what it concluded, not because it's crazy. So that becomes a self-limiting experience and then belief. Well, it was limiting at first. So really part of the healing process, some of the journey to healing or a big part of it for a survivor, is really all parts being able to finally begin to risk finding out what is true. Every part is convinced. Why? Because they're normal. And so like any of us. So now the question is what I believe really true? And that's hard because if left to ourselves, we believe things are true and there's like a force field, and I'm not going to go beyond that force. Think about like a dog that has, I guess they have now those invisible fences. That's a good analogy, right? That somehow there's a force field there. And if I hit that thing enough, well, nobody's a masochist, so I just know that, okay, I'm not going to go beyond that. And so that's a very interesting and true kind of parallel analogy. So you do enough stuff to a kid in the right kind of way, and they will not venture beyond a certain parameter, whether in their thought, in their actions, in their life. And so what therapy really is inviting a survivor. So the therapist walks with the survivor up to those barriers. And we risk. And that's really, so we're breaking barriers. It's interesting. I hadn't quite thought about it like that, but that's very true. So we're taking captive every thought. We're hurting like cats, or we're hurting the cats, we're getting them all in there. And then we're going to tear down strongholds. So we're, little by little, we're taking cinder blocks down. We're analyzing them. What is this one? Does it have to be there? And so that's where the parts, in a way, get honored or treated with honor. We're not here to kick walls down. We're here to actually help the parts discern and determine. Is this, I know you were told, this is what you have to do. Let's analyze that. I was working with a client today that it's just my approach. That's why I don't do hypnosis or EMDR for complex trauma, for childhood trauma, or guided imagery. I'm becoming more and more persuaded that I don't think any therapist should be doing that with a client. That's my own bias now. And the client, so we were just looking at her timeline. That's another good thing that I recommend, that every client should do a timeline, because the pooling of all your parts are your timeline. That's where all your memories went. And so as you talk about something that you can remember, little by little, more will come back. And we're just methodically talking about mom. And a part of her, she said, I gotta be honest with you, part of me is really angry with you right now. I said, talk to me about it. What? She says, you're starting to irritate me. Because we're just being very methodical. We're not going to say mom's a creep or mom's wonderful, or we're just going to ask kind of questions. Like the time that you were a kid and you had that headache, it could have been meningitis, but mom looked at you and she chose not to whisk you off to the hospital. What does that mean? Is that normal? What does a normal mother do? And would you do that? And if you wouldn't do it, but you would intervene, you would show more care and compassion given the mother you had, how would you know? And that's just little droplets of truth, helping to start comparing and contrasting. And therefore, the strongholds, the prisons, start to come down. So that's what we're doing. And we're going to pick up where we left off with the parts we're going to pick up next week. But meanwhile, we're looking at perpetrators. And can this even be true? SRA, MK Ultra, this stuff can't be true because no adult would ever do. And that's what we're looking at. And so I guess drawing upon my actual work with perpetrators, most people that will naysay, like the false memory foundation wannabes and hold-ons, and what's our guy, Soylent Green guy from the Satanic Temple, I'm still waiting. Okay, Soylent Green.
I'm waiting too.
Right, Soylent Green, I'm still waiting for my invitation. Okay. Okay. So the non-Satanic Temple, he told me we could debate, but no. So you'll have those people. The premise is this.
Lucian Greaves, step up.
Come on. I'm very affable. Okay.
Oh,
but
man,
there's two things that the naysayers will say, that if anything significant happens to a kid, they'll remember. Okay. Interesting that we don't have a problem if somebody is in a car accident, no head trauma, but they can't remember because something traumatic happened, and we call that amnesia. So we expect kids are going to remember from childhood trauma, but we cut adult slack. Okay, so the two premise, the false memory foundation frauds that went defunct, but they still, satanic panic, it's all coming from the same thing, right? It all boils down to this. If something traumatic happens, the more traumatic you'll remember it. Okay. So we hold kids to a higher standard than adults, because there goes the concept of amnesia. You got to be consistent. So we have to get rid of the concept of amnesia, because we'll remember everything that happens just shy of a head trauma. So that's first. The second is no adult would actually do this to a kid. And you notice all those adults that want to say that want to run their mouths like that, have never worked in a prison, never read criminal files, criminal history, police reports. I can tell you what perpetrators do. I've read the reports. Really heinous things, really, really bad things. All the bad people that get convicted, where do they go? Go to prison. What happens once they're in prison as far as structurally and the process? Like when somebody goes to prison, after the gavel goes down, they're ushered out. They go from county to now state, upstate. They go upstream, upriver. What happens? The van pulls up. What happens? Anybody that's still pushing the myth of the false memory foundation, tell me what happens. I can tell you what happens. Why? Because I worked there. You don't. You can't tell me. What's the likelihood that Epstein was killed? For you, it's theory. I can tell you exactly, because I would have been assigned to the likes of an Epstein. I can tell you exactly when rounds are done. I can tell you exactly the initial check-in. What does the sheet look like? You tell me what the initial sheet that we had to fill out as psych staff. You don't know. So the false memory perps had never been a therapist, and you've never worked with criminals. So politely, I'll say it, shut up and sit down. And don't run your mouth outside your scope of practice. So enough of that. Okay. I felt good saying that. Uhler, let us know how you really feel. Well, it's time. It's time somebody just look at these people and say, you're running your mouth and I'm tired of it. Tell me, how long have you worked in a clinical capacity with survivors and kids, troubled teens? Well, I haven't. Oh, but you're going to tell me what survivors, what kids do or don't remember. You ever seen spontaneous boils and blisters and bruises and marks on the skin appear? Have you ever seen that? Oh, no, you haven't. Well, you don't have pictures. I have pictures. Why? A number of clients have taken pictures. I've seen them, and they match exactly what's going to come out. So, yeah, the body keeps the score. So there are such things as body memories that match horrific, heinous abuse, torture. So, yeah, there are people that actually torture kids. So there goes false memory foundation. If it was even around any longer, it's not. And then what kind of men? Would adults do this? Yeah. They were my clients, and I still do sex offender treatment. I did it earlier tonight. So I got 5 sex offender treatment groups. Do you know the kind of guys that are in my groups? They run the gamut, and that's what we're talking about. So the Silent Green Lucius guy, right? Invite me on, because I want to hear about your clinical background, both forensic and mental health. Since you're so confident that people would never do something to kids. So that's what we're talking about.
Heck yeah, John. Thank you for all of that. I really love this series. I love how it all fits together. And I think too, I was telling you before we started recording also, I love that we're going over the perpetrator parts, and learning about psychopathy and learning about sexual deviance and your knowledge behind it. Because I think too, as we dig deeper into the system of a survivor, it's going to really help those parts connect to the survivor that's discovering the parts. There's a lot of people going through this with us, and doing sort of like their own therapy at home, and discovering their system, so they're learning about what caused all of this, who did it to them. And I think it's going to really help assist survivors in their healing process as they meet different parts, as they start to build trust within their system and work together, to orchestrate a smoothly moving machine in a sense. I think this talk is really important. It's very healing to be able to, like you say, take the knapsacks off and throw them back. So I appreciate you doing this with us and sharing both ends of the spectrum. Your knowledge base and experience is very unique, and it's really fascinating for us to get to learn all of this.
Okay, well, the good news for some people is that we're going to wrap up talking about perps tonight. So that's probably good news for some people. So I figure what we'll do is we'll just kind of do a brief overview of that chart. We're going to look at a few more charts, and then we're going to look at what are some clinical, from a clinical perspective, what are the factors involved in psychopathy? And then we're going to look at about a 12-minute compilation of clips from a very good neuroscientist who will kind of walk us through, or walk the audience through. So I'll share the link where it comes from, of the differences in the brains of a psychopath. So we're going to look at that. I'm also going to help correct his own perspective, because he highlights, he thinks certain people are psychopaths that they aren't, so that aren't. So it's a good reminder. Each of us need to stay in our lane. He's done meta-analysis, so that's okay. But I will suggest you just stay with neuroscience and not try to suggest who is or isn't a psychopath if all you've done is meta-analysis. Where are you going to work with psychopaths? I'm not saying that nobody can surmise. I'm not saying that. I probably was pretty good prior to working in the prison system. But let's face it, where are you going to encounter bona fide psychopaths that you know? Well, you're not going to encounter them based upon their own self-report, meaning people in the community, family members. You ever once heard somebody walk up, say, I'm a psychopath? I'll give you a hint. They're lying if they do, because psychopaths don't believe they are, and they're certainly not going to give up the goods. So the only place you're really going to be able to study psychopaths is in prison. And then the question is, how are you studying them? Are you an outsider getting permission to go into a prison? Then how many hours do you have? And you're interviewing who? The world's greatest liars, or work around them. And in such a way where you're better at it than they are. Better at what? Better at chess. The only time you're really going to learn about a psychopath is when he's starting to be beaten. That's rare, especially if they're smart. And the only time that's going to happen is probably after a number of years, and especially if they're in solitary confinement. About year number 6 or 7. That's when you'll start. It's a very unique phenomenon. And then they're at the door and they're just talking when you invite them to the door. But it's going to take you about a conversation of about an hour, and no psych staff. They could have those, but they don't care enough. But I was interested. So I had conversations with psychopaths, or allowed them to have conversations with me. And you know you're onto something when they say, well, Mr. Uhler, okay, I've never told anybody this before. Now you're going to get some pretty unique information where they've got nothing to gain. They're not gaming. It's not game theory. Now you're going to get some qualitative data. Now you're going to be able to interview them. Very few people do that. Very few people have access to it. I was just interested enough. Every psych staff could do it. Most are not interested. So I spent a long time, more years in solitary confinement, right, as far as a psych staff. So I dug deep. That's where these charts come from. And so hopefully then the benefit is for people to be able to see how somebody gets that way, how somebody becomes that way. So we'll look at the brain difference, but then I'll qualify some of the stuff in his video. But to show you that the brain really is different. And the premise is, and Robert Hare was the first one to suggest it, and I thought about it, and I think he's right, and he confirmed what's in the Book of Romans. Not that we need Robert Hare to confirm what's in the Book of Romans. But when a brain shifts psychopathic, it never comes back. So you can be given over, and there's a point of no return. And what does that look like? So we'll look at the brains, but what does somebody look like? That's what we're unpacking. So without any further ado, Emma, you've been a trooper through all this. Okay, so we'll do a couple of things. We're just going to finish up here. I won't throw the entire kitchen sink at you, but we're going to kind of wrap it up. So I'll screen share, and we'll start with, we're going to look at, we're not going to do really any review in depth. We're just going to, once again, show this chart. I've got a couple of other charts I decided not to try to overlay because it's too much work, quite frankly. Now, which one am I at? Gosh, all of them came up. Okay, I think we're on this one. So Emma, you probably, sorry about that. Do you see the same chart that we've been working on? I think it's the same chart.
Yep, I see it.
There we go. Okay. So for those that haven't been with us, I recommend go back and begin the, I think 3 videos or 3 interviews or episodes, sorry. Okay. So these are just some independent dynamic factors, as it were, not so much factors, but dynamics layered upon each other. Because when somebody has reached a point that they are psychopathic, again, a psychopath, whether a bloody psychopath or white collar psychopath, always comes down to 3 things: no conscience, and that's the key. Okay, that's the key to understanding all of this. How do you get to a point where you have no conscience? It takes a lot of work, in this sense that you are overriding conscience. It takes more work in the beginning, of course, because conscience works at the beginning. But eventually you can get to a point where there is no conscience, and that's where that red portion came up. Little by little, you grow a callus, and you cauterize, and you calcify your conscience, and it doesn't work. That's right about here. On a scale of 1 to 10, we got, say, minus. We're kind of going downhill. So -1 to -10, that's what we'd put maybe a -6, -7 in there. Okay. And again, how to read the chart, you go straight down. You can make your own columns, as it were. And it's all based upon right down here, continuum of sexual objectification, predation. Right here. Deviant arousal. So we could do, as we did before, making columns based upon these lines in here, as we did before. So give or take, there's about 10 gradations as someone's going downhill. And once you hit deviance, and right in here, and I'll increase it now. I just want to give you the overall flow. So these different dynamic factors, as it were, or dynamics in play, and eventually you'll have someone that's morphing into, from a sociopath, morphing into a psychopath down here on the bottom, and then a layering effect, what they can do. And that's really important, because to understand, if you were on the receiving end of a white collar psychopath, they're not going to tell you they're a psychopath. But for someone who, especially male, that can do heinous things, same thing for a female, but more sex offenders are male anymore. For most of the women that are psychopaths, they're going to facilitate the male perp. Think about Ghislaine Maxwell with Epstein. Think about Allison Mack with Nixium's Keith Raniere. So that, another type of female psychopath is the massage parlor owner. You see a lot of females that will human traffic the women in, and meanwhile, the women are basically prostituted out. Inevitably, you're going to see a number of women that are running those. A guy will inevitably be involved too, but it's not uncommon when a bust takes place. You see on the news, they've busted the people running this ring, and you'll see like 4 or 5 women and 1 guy. Kind of that ratio when it comes to some of these trafficking situations. Now, as far as acting it out, so the women will tend to be the finders, so to speak. That is that's actual group, or no, that was a book, right? A video series, okay, the finders. So the women will tend to find them, and the men will tend to abuse them. So when you get further over to the right, these are all the characteristics, and then things layer one upon the other as far as what can happen to a child. And eventually, and now I'll increase this again. We've dealt with this before, or we've looked at this before. I'll increase it a little bit more. So eventually what you end up with then is, as the perpetrator moves psychopathic, you'll see very consistently what they're doing to their victims. So they're first rendering them defenseless, and then they're inflicting trauma. Okay. Now, is that going to create parts? It may. But the more you layer dynamics, the things you're doing. So it's first, you're rendering them defenseless and inflicting trauma. You can do that physically, you're rendering them defenseless, or emotionally. But probably by this time, as a matter of fact, look up here, captivated, deliberate. So you are probably restraining the kid by some degree. And then you're going to overwhelm them, which is really, you're ramping up the trauma. So you're inflicting trauma. Now you're looking for the effect and the immobilizing. So it's one thing rendering them defenseless. Now you're really going to restrain them. And then while they're restrained, now you're going to do horrible things to them, horrify and incapacitate. This is when the splitting, a lot of the split, well, I say down here, but think about when you're incapacitating. Well, okay, that's why I layer these, because look at where the splitting takes place. So we could actually draw a line straight down where the splitting takes place. So by the time part splits off, you're already traumatizing, and you're overwhelming and immobilizing and horrifying and incapacitating, and you're terrorizing. So there are aspects of all of that by the time somebody splits off. And then why are they causing the split? Because they want to ensure compliance. And so we call that programming, or what I've been calling is persuasion. So that's where that's going on. And also secure silence. So these are the different kinds of parts, if you really think about it. Okay, so that's kind of, I think we can really boil it down to these. I don't like that term, sorry. But, you can really pare things down to those, right? You're either ensuring compliance, that's obedience, and this is maintaining the secrets. And by the time you get there, you're dealing with dark stuff, whether overt or covert. spiritual stuff. So you can have I could perceive, you can have an MK Ultra guy that isn't into Satanism. You can have a Satanist that's not into MK Ultra, but you certainly have the convergence of that, or they're energized by darkness. So that's the chart again. I recommend you go back and look at what we have talked about before. I'm going to stop sharing, and now we're going to get into another chart. I've already shown a couple of these, but I figure we're going to look at some of the charts right there that I had put together during my time in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. Let me find it. There we go. Okay, so you can find these, by the way, on churchprotect.org under the Truths tab. If you scroll down far enough, you'll actually see these. You got to scroll down a fair ways, but you'll see these. So I'm going to increase this now, and maybe I'll take these. These are in no certain order, so we'll just kind of go through these. There's no logic to the order because I was trying to cut and paste. So we'll just go through these. So an SVP, sexually violent predator, again, that's not a legal status. That is it's legal, but that's a designation placed on a perpetrator by a judge. Okay, so sometimes this is horse traded away. What do I mean by that? Somebody deserves to be SVP because there's definitely, you're going to be lifetime registry for the sex offender registry. There's going to be the highest level of constraints. So offenders don't want the label of SVP. Jimmy Hinton's father, who was a fake pastor, so he was pastor by day, perping on kids for years and years and years. He was in prison. He was going to die in prison because of his age. So in essence, he has a life sentence. So he shouldn't have. What does it matter? Probably he didn't want it in prison, but he was going to be given SVP. But can you imagine this guy? He's going to die in prison. So he was given like 25 to 50. By that time he was in his 60s. So he's not getting out because in Pennsylvania you're eligible for parole once you hit your midway point. So he's not getting out, and he just didn't want the label the judge put or was going to put SVP, and so they horse traded this away. Go figure. Okay, which is despicable in my estimation. Okay, so we'll read through this. Forensic clinical treatment has repeatedly shown that of all sexual offenders scheduled for eventual release from prison, the sexual, oh, that's redundant. Sorry, this should be sexually violent predator, is the most likely sex offender specifically to select churches. So sorry, that's redundant. That should be SVP. That's very true. When I was on church staff, I didn't know this. So there are a lot of pastors, if they're legitimate and decent, we're just not taught, or they're not taught. So people in churches, that's why Church Protect exists, to educate churches that the most sophisticated ones are targeting you. Okay? This category of offender is the least likely to change. Why? They're the most psychopathic. So the most sophisticated that are most likely to target churches know how to lie the most. They will talk a good game, especially if they've been in prison, and they'll say, "Oh, Pastor, I've learned my lesson. I was the prodigal. I've seen what I became, and I'm just having a hard time forgiving myself, and I don't think I can ever believe that God can forgive me, and maybe I need a community that can help me understand God's love. I just can't seem to believe that God could forgive me." Do you know how many pastors will fall for that? And what does that perp do? That perp will be welcomed back into the regular service. Now, am I saying that a church or a pastor should never welcome a guy in? This is exactly what I'm saying, right? Which is this, that there should be a special arrangement for a sex offender that has an offense against a child where it amounts to a mentorship, kind of like Jesus did with the disciples. You do not need to be around, if you're a male perpetrator, you do not need to be around, and you should not be around women and children, especially children if you have a child offense, to grow spiritually. So here's my Greek phrase: cut the crap out and stop it. Okay, and you already know it. If a guy's on parole, he's violating his parole, by the way. He knows that. Okay, the SVP has become so morally depraved that he has no conscience, no empathy, and no remorse. And he prefers it that way. Okay, that's what's important to know. The wolf in sheep's clothing has passed the point of no return. Romans chapter 1, he's been given over. Thus, for purposes of keeping kids safe, there's no such thing as a reformed sexually violent predator, because it's really hard to get an SVP list. So, pastors, you better do your homework. And if you see a guy with SVP, you're dealing with somebody that had to work hard to get that. Okay, here's how somebody progresses. This should sound familiar, by the way, because of what we've already talked about. Here's the progression into what I'm just calling dark sex, which is evil stuff and pedophilia. So there's no such thing as a minor attracted person. That is a lie. So maps are lies, and furries and maps go hand in hand, by the way. Okay, and also AGPs. Okay, so don't let anybody tell you these are sensitive men. They're not. They're sexually deviant, and we've already looked at how somebody becomes that way. So here's the progressive steps by degree. This is really pretty accurate. We've already kind of looked at this, looking at the chart, but now we're going to read through it. So number one, he's become comfortable with immoral and depraved sensuality. That's not illegal, but he's become, right? So what's he doing with his conscience? He's violating his conscience. So he's already becoming comfortable with it. So that means his conscience is not working all that well. He's already well underway overriding his conscience. So it's like a little dial. So he's turning the dial down. So he's already becoming a concern. So with immoral and depraved sensuality, and now look at the progression. He gives himself over to pornography. Okay, and this is way back when. I mean, softcore now, I don't even know if people start with softcore, except anime and hentai and furry porn. But we could have sports. Well, I still say Sports Illustrated. Do I have that down here? Okay, we'll just go on. Softcore pictures. Then it progresses. So here's the progression: hardcore pictures and videos, chat rooms, erotica. That's 50 Shades of Grey kind of stuff. Barely legal. That's that key, right? Everything kind of like an hourglass comes down to a point. So everybody, all the perpetrators start with adult women that they're looking at. So don't ever let a guy tell you that all he ever saw is kiddie porn when he was young, and he's always been attracted to kids' bodies. That is a lie. Okay, at age 10, at age 12, he saw a female, an adult female, and then it progressed. Okay, so barely legal. The perps for whom there's hope reach this barely legal stage. So the age of the women getting younger looking, or they're trying to make the women look younger and younger, and they're making the kids look older and older. It all comes to anywhere between about age 13 to 16. They call that barely legal, but we know that's illegal in a lot of countries. Okay, but the inmates, they all know this term, barely legal. Okay, the inmates for whom there's hope, they'll come down, they'll hit barely legal, so to speak. They are shocked by themselves, strangely enough, because they may still have some vestige of conscience, and they will back away. A pedophile hits barely legal and keeps going. He never puts on the brakes. Fantasy and role play. Right? Look at what's going on these days with the internet. Right? This is all right. If a kid starts with this, look at how many levels or how many steps he's already starting with. How about this? How about 50 Shades of Grey? To introduce a kid to 50 Shades of Grey, look at what you've bypassed. It's really scary what we're doing to kids these days. We're creating little young sexual psychopaths at an amazing rate. Look at what's going on in elementary schools. That the little nine-year-old boys are raping 9-year-old girls in the bathroom. They're gang raping them. Okay, homosexual themed. That's where it starts to get into. We have the leather stuff. Also now hypno-sissy porn. More sissy porn in there. Here's the huge concern, right? Ted Bundy said he got into that. So detective stuff. And then child porn. And so whenever you see a guy into bestiality, okay, bestiality inevitably, probably a guy gets into bestiality before child porn, but it all kind of happens at the same time. So if you find a guy that's into furries, what's he looking at? Okay, do not believe a guy, whatever a guy says he's into as far as looking at, multiply it by 10, and that's the reality behind the scenes. Okay. So if he's looking at bestiality, or if he's an AGP, he's looking at all this crap. That's why he's becoming so brazen, by the way, and they're going to push boundaries. So I'm not talking about the guys that stay with adult men and they're in the clubs, okay? But if they're pushing boundaries, trying to access women and children, how about the men that are also now self-IDing and going into Planet Fitness? Right? It's pathetic. They are dangerous. Planet Fitness is facilitating really dangerous pre-arrested sex offenders. I'll just put it that way. Number 3, he willfully deviates into the perverse, the forbidden, the taboo porn and type of activities. Those things that are taboo. Oh, we just call them fetishes. That's a fetish right there. It's not fetish, it's perversion. Okay, so you can see, you can imagine. Okay, Soylent Green of the non-satanic satanic temple, go ahead and explain that to me. How you guys don't produce perpetrators, by the way. Okay, moving along. Number 4, he descends into domination of his partner. Now look at what he's into by the time he does that. So that's the BDSM stuff. So domination is not love, folks. So you, for a man, you're already, you've ventured into psychopathy here. Right? Now it descends further into power and control. So this is objectifying. Then he does what? He sexually violates, there it is, non-consenting minor. Because what? Barely legal. So now you've got a non-consenting minor. Well, can a minor ever consent? There's a difference, right? Here he's manipulating. Of course, a minor can't consent. Okay, but the idea that here he's manipulating in here, and here he doesn't really care. And so he is putting pressure on. So this is where he runs the risk of getting busted. And so he's going to use different tactics here to ensure silence. So he can be perping all along, but by the time he gets down here, now he's going for non-consenting. Why? Because a consenting minor isn't as fun, meaning using that idea of game theory, and I don't use that lightly, meaning in that perverse sense, right? That's much more deviantly exciting for a perp to cross those boundaries, and they're marring and scarring the soul. 7, he descends even further into a desire to steal purity and innocence. So you can see how he's going to start to move even younger in age. He descends still further to degrade. This has nothing to do with sexuality. I want you all to know that it has nothing to do with lust. So no man is minor attracted. This is, we're getting into, degrading has nothing to do with sexuality. And then 9, he desires to mar and deface, steal and destroy. The devil comes to steal and kill, steal and destroy. And 10, he sexually offends a child in any way possible, being willing, able, and finding pleasure in the victim's trauma. This is SRA and MK Ultra down here. Okay, moving along. I think we saw this before, but we'll stick with this chart. I'm going to increase it just for a moment. Here's the progression. So it's another way to look at this same progression. Maybe I'll increase it even more a little bit. How's that? Okay, so prolonged attraction and emotional pull. Remember, we talked about this is not illegal. This is a guy that's starting to be foolish and stupid. He's then leaving himself open to temptation. He's got no personal firewall. He's starting to just peruse. This is channels, what we used to call channel surfing. He's now online. So again, this typical married guy or some guy that even in church, actually every guy, potentially, right? When you go online, gentlemen, you always need what? You need to be aware, okay? Actively allowing sexually provocative or stimulating material. Look at how minor compared to everything else now. We got what, Sports Illustrated? I think they went out of business now, which is a good thing. Victoria's Secret, because they were featuring what? Right? The cross-dressing guys. So they're talking about deviant. Victoria's Secret, right? And if your response, listening to this, if we have some people watching this, say, Jon, what are you talking about? That's not even there. That means you're downplaying it. I can tell you what, if you downplay this Victoria's Secret catalog stuff or the different stuff on TV, like sports, right? If you downplay even this most mild stuff, what does that freak me out? No, I deal with sex offenders. Okay. But if you downplay this, I can already tell you you're into other stuff because that's why this is mild, because you're not bothered that you're now objectifying women. Yeah, right. We could say, well, every guy does it. Well, that's not true, number one, but left to themselves. Okay. And I'm not saying it's not tempting. What I'm saying is this will lead you down there. Okay. You got catalogs. So Victoria's Secret catalogs and women, be very careful. Explicit romance novels. So women need to be mindful as well, but we're focusing on men here. Now, look at the difference. So this guy's leaving himself open to, he's actively allowing. So it's like he's not locking the doors. He's leaving the doors open, doors of his mind. That, by the way, is if you've ever heard about the category of the simple in the book of Proverbs or Psalms, right? The simple does that. The word simple means open door. There are times that's different than open-minded. At times we need to actually shut the door, right? So do not entertain stuff because before you know it, now you're seeking it out. Now you're not just seeking out sexually stimulating stuff, but now it's going for graphic. And then it's shifting. And the moment it shifts, you're into a whole different ballgame. Now you're into deviance, okay? Sexually exploitive stuff. So what used to satisfy here, it starts, you need something more and harder and then more. And then now you're into definite deviance, okay? Definite objectification. All the different computer stuff. Here's the animal characters. Here's furries. Here's anime, hentai stuff. Oh, sorry. Okay, now sexual use, manipulation. Now you can see it's starting to quote unquote act out, but it's not acting out. He's now been energized. This is when he's going to offend, but the illegal material was over here by degrees somewhere. Think about on our chart. So when somebody quote unquote does it for the first time, they're not going to get busted. Typically, by the time they're busted, they've been doing stuff for years and years. Okay. So now they are this is when they're producing victims. And now look at it's not just manipulation, exploitation, and degradation. Now we're doing what? Now this is the psychopathic. This is the sociopathic stuff. Get what you can get. This is cause harm, psychological harm, physical harm, but the psychological is what they're after. Okay, so in this category, calculated sexual rape and use of children for purposes of personal power and control and sexual deviance, profit, and ego satisfaction, having defrauded their innocence. So this is we're not even to SRA and MK Ultra, by the way. That is this. So this is psychopathy. Cold, calculated, methodical, and strategic raping of the child or adult, motivated by the thrill of the chase in cat and mouse and the ability to fool those who would try to stop him. Okay, that's where the strategy comes in. That's where they love putting it out there, right? And this is where you will see that even, I was just thinking of the Masons, right? You look at a guy and he's got his hand partway tucked in like Napoleon, right? They're doing all these little signs and symbols out in public. The Illuminati symbols, right? So this is where they love toying and putting it right out there. And they want to permanently defile, traumatize, terrorize, dehumanize, and destroy the victims. Okay, that's that's the progression of deviance into psychopathy. We've got the little the spinning pizza of weight. My computer's catching up, and we will scroll up. There we go. Now, how different are the sex offenders? Watch your eyes. I'm going to scroll down again. Everybody watch your eyes right there. I didn't want to get you sick. Okay. We've looked at this before. Here's the range of sex offenses according to me. Okay. I will publish at some point in time. I just haven't had the time yet. So this is probably the best way to view it. And then you look at where they are in terms of the downward slide morally. So we've got the misdemeanor sexual offenders. So those guys likely are just going to get parole, or it takes a lot of work. So a couple times they may not even get prosecuted whatsoever, or they're going to get parole. But every now and then, it's few, but I've had guys in my sex offender treatment. So in prison, you can have what's called the young and the dumb, and nobody benefits. But this is the 19-year-old that was, he turned 18 in high school. He's 19. He should have been moving on to college, people, friends, girls as his focus. But what is he doing? He's still hanging out with the former friends in high school. So it sets him up for wearing the same label. It's a real tragedy when you have these guys because they're given the same label as all of these guys. So it's just, I don't know, our society is schizophrenic. I'm not saying these guys aren't, they don't need to learn a lesson, but you potentially are ruining their whole future, right? And so let's say she was 15, he was 17, he turns 18 prior to her turning 16. And what can the parents do? Let's say his parents or her parents don't like him, and all of a sudden they call the cops. And now he's arrested and he's called a sex offender. Okay. Low level felony sex offender. Okay. This is getting into where I could do some real work here. You know what? This guy that gets locked up, that pretty much does it for him. He's learned his lesson, but he still needs to gain some insight into what he's done. This guy probably is not going to reoffend. He is not going to hang out with high school girls, right? He's learned his lesson. So you don't need too much. You need sex offender treatment so he can figure out why he was so stupid. And that's not a pejorative term, the young and the dumb. Okay. Low level felony sex offenders, we're dealing with this selfishness, and he's just an idiot. That's a Greek word, to know nothing, meaning this guy already knows the difference between right and wrong. What was he doing? Because of his selfishness, he's ignoring what? Conscience. So this guy just needs to hit bottom. In a way, be slapped upside the head, so to speak, with reality. And what do you do with selfishness? You can't therapize it. You squish it like a bug, pop it like a zit. Okay, this is just straight up truth. This guy has to come to terms with, and the 12 steps is good for him in here, right? Step 4, right? Steps 1 through 3, there's a God, you're not him. And then step 4 does what? Took a searching and fearless moral inventory. And looking at what? How selfish he was. And then the rest of the 12 steps, 5 through 10, is he's going to go make amends. He's going to make a list of everybody he harmed. Okay, so the 12 steps are important for this guy in here. The rest, we're dealing with deviance. So we're dealing with predators by degree. Mild, nothing is mild, but just a low level. See, that's even horrible. But this is all predation. This is all deviance. And this is all the beginning of psychopathy. We can have sociopathy in here. Okay, we'll say this is a sociopath. So he's not going to overtly cross boundaries, but he's going to manipulate. So we'll call him the sociopath in here. Okay, sociopathy is about sales. How to win friends and influence people, right? So you're trying to get over on someone. But once you start to manipulate, okay, I take that back. I would be willing to say this is still a sociopath in here. So we could say this is sociopathy because manipulative, you're supposed to say, John, didn't you write this chart? Yeah, it's been a while. So I'm thinking this through. Manipulative, conniving, scheming. So you can see they're not manhandling anybody, and I'm not I'm not minimizing any of this, but you can see how someone, like the song, the gambler, when to hold them, fold them, walk away and run. Okay, so he's manipulating, he's conniving, he's scheming. This is when he's meeting a bunch of girls online, right? So he's just lying. This is just a flat out liar. This guy's an ego-driven individual. This guy's a flat out liar. But to become a flat out liar, you have to have a huge ego. So you become narcissistic first before you become sociopathic. So that's kind of transitioning. Notice callous. Now we're into predation. So this is very much the predator. So this is the beginning of psychopathy through here. So we got the sexual predator. Think about the age. It's getting worse. Meaning it's lowering. We got barely legal in here. And eventually, if he keeps going, what's it going to be? All right. So deceitful, calculating, and callous. So how much truth are you going to get out of a sexual predator? So if your research takes at face value anybody from here over to the right, how you're really going to take to the bank what he's saying. You're writing everything down. Do you have any ability to verify that? No. Have you, can he produce proof of what he's talking about? No. Can he produce any films of how he was abused, right? All these guys, because they've learned that all they have to do is say they were abused as kids. Oh, okay. You're abused as a kid, but you ended up looking very normal, assuming a position of responsibility, trust, and authority. You were very calm, cool, collected. Everybody trusted you. You were a mandated reporter. Yet you're trying to tell me you were abused, but it never fazed you? Well, Jon, you don't understand. I was just depressed for a long time. I never sought help. Oh, okay. So I'm supposed to take your word for it. But how come in all the pictures we ever saw, you were smiling and that's how you attracted your victims? You're lying through your teeth. There's no such thing as minor attracted persons, non-offending pedophiles. They're only non-offending is because they haven't gotten busted yet. There is no virtuous pedophile. It's a lie. Okay. Once it becomes pedophile, it's sick, twisted, and depraved because it takes a lot of work to get to the point where you're offending a child. There's the sexually violent predator for adults and then for kids. That's the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay, now with this same chart, we're going to overlay. I'm going to go up now. There we go. Look at the range of sex offenders. I'm going to go back down and show you where that was again, just for the heck of it. We're looking at the range of sex offenders right here. Now we're going to show you what they're into. I'm going to go back up. Watch your eyes. There we go. Okay. Again, it's a layering effect. Nobody suddenly, look over in the bottom right, nobody suddenly has a desire to defile a child, which you'll hear guys talk about, and even the research, you know, and it's flawed research in a way. Why? Because they're interviewing pedophiles. Well, the guy was never, he just had low self-esteem. He was going through depression. Okay. If you believe that, you're a sucker. Okay. So by the time how different, now let me qualify this. How different are they from regular sex offenders? It sounds strange, right? Nobody's a regular sex offender, but meaning pedophiles. Okay. I didn't write the word pedophile. Okay. So are they different? Yes, they are. Because you have a compounding effect. So by the time you defile a child, you are really, forget sick, okay? You are really, so there's so much layering that has gone on. You are psychopathic. That's why no cognitive behavioral therapy and sex offender treatment is not that you don't know the difference between right and wrong if you're a perpetrator. You have no heart and you're evil. And how did you get that way? So you started and it took you. So there's a layering effect that will match as he moves from left to right. So once somebody becomes a sexual perpetrator, meaning actively doing stuff, he already is personality disordered. He may be antisocial or or narcissistic. Now, antisocial, one of the key things to it is it's impulsive and kind of kicks against societal norms. That's not the sophisticated ones we're talking about, by the way. So it's interesting how the majority of sex offender treatment, when they're dealing with pedophiles, they'll use the categories in the PCLR, and I will have another category. I'm going to show you another couple of categories, okay, that I've added. Okay, so you're certainly personality disordered, meaning it is a long-standing, pervasive way, and it's just this is who you've become by choice, to be honest. So you are antisocial and narcissistic, but in antisocial has to be, again, has to do with kicking against societal norms. But you are this way. So once you become sociopathic and psychopathic, you're becoming fixed. Okay, then on top of that self-entitlement, now look at what you're into. You move from perpetrator, so you believe you have the right to cross people's boundaries. You're willing to take advantage. Now you go on the hunt. Actually, here's predator. So this is when you're becoming twisted. So now it's really deviant, meaning now you're into harm, you're into effect, and therefore you're becoming profoundly sexually twisted, warped, and deviant. So in here is the point of no return, somewhere in there. Okay? Meaning this guy will never want to come back. He thinks it's stupid. So he's lost the desire to ever be any other way than what he is. That's the term reprobate, by the way. Okay, so he's personality disordered, and then he gets into profoundly sexually twisted, warped, and deviant material, and then he's driven by sexual gratification via power and control. I could also actually put that up here, but it's all in here, so you can see power and control. Right, it's not about a relationship at all. So he's filling his mind with twisted, warped stuff. He gets into power and control. This is pure objectification. Actively seeks to sexually defraud. So now it's just not what he can get off on, but the negative effect. He's trying to defraud and steal. Now he's really, this is in the emotions, this is in the psyche. And now what do we have here? Victim unable or unwilling to consent. This is both in age as well as the capacity. So you're holding someone against their will by degree. Okay, or you've so leveraged something that they're unable to, you're going to make them an offer they can't refuse, kind of thing. That's like organized crime. And then what? Think about the age. So you've already gotten into barely legal. That's over here somewhere. So now meet the criteria for a pedophile, because you're doing adults, you're using adults, but now you're starting to focus more on kids. Dominance and great degradation. This could still be adults, but now you really a pedophile, right? They're really focusing on the kids. They could still have adult victims at the same time, by the way. No empathy or conscience. There you go. That's psychopathy. And look up here. So by the time you harm a child in this way, dominate and degrade, you have no empathy and conscience, you're a psychopath. And desire to generate trauma and desire to defile a child. This is the SRA and MK Ultra. Okay, we're going to go back up. Let me see if, no, we're going to go down now. As soon as my computer cooperates. I have my eye on the clock. I don't want to keep you too long, but you know what? Maybe split this up, watch this in two sessions, because there is a really good video I'm going to show everybody. We'll comment on it. I have a compilation of a good video dealing with psychopathy. Okay, underlying goals of sexual perpetration. This kind of matches another one that we've seen before. This is one of the first charts I put together. We'll just go across the top. What is the goal? To blemish, to tarnish, to spoil, to steal, and destroy. The devil comes to steal and destroy. So you've harmonized with darkness. You've harmonized with the author of darkness in here, whether you're a Satanist or not. Okay, so at first, what's going on? This will actually kind of match these levels up here by degree. Okay, but by the time somebody becomes an actual active perpetrator, you want to blemish the victim's sense of normalcy. So actually, we're probably up here, right? By this time, this is pretty much entering into psychopathy, now that I think about it. Because now this is deviance, right? This is not sexuality. So you want to blemish the victim's sense of normalcy. So here are the stages downward of what the perp wants to do. So he wants to corrupt, he wants to pervert, he wants to warp, he likes to demean, it's into shaming. So it moves from blemishing to tarnish. A little bit different, right? Blemish, you're dimming the light, so to speak, but tarnishing, you're layering over. Think about if you have brass at the ocean, it will turn from copper-looking color or brass color to a green or a turquoise, right? Then you have to polish it again. So you're tarnishing the victim's sense of being wholesome. So this is since any rape victim, right? She feels dirty. Okay, so while they're doing that, the perp is also shaming, violating, degrading, and humiliating. So by the time he's gotten into humiliating, now look at the difference. We're corrupting the morals, so to speak. We're now humiliating. And the goal is what? To spoil the victim's sense of being desirable. Now we're into lifetime trauma. Right? No one will ever want you. No one will ever, you're used material. You're nothing but trash. You're defective. Now that's bad enough, but here they go. The perp's going to continue. He wants to stain and soil and defile and defacing. This is psychopathy. Now what's the goal? We've gone from to blemish, to tarnish, to spoil, to steal the victim's sense of hope. That is SRA and MK Ultra. So we're going to steal the victim's sense of hope by taking away her innocence, security, and peace. So if any of you have parts, this is what a part of you, think about the perp or the perpetrator. They are not nice people. This is the level, and it's over here, by degree. There's no way when you allow yourself, or when the parts start to allow themselves to really think about it, this is all about them. Meaning, this has nothing to do with you. This is how evil. And the smarter they are, they made you, they thought you were never, they thought you were not smart enough to ever figure it out. Figure what out? That it's this kind of stuff. They were causing blemishes and tarnishing you and spoiling you, meaning causing you to feel spoiled, being ruined, like food is spoiled. And then they're stealing what? Your innocence, purity, and peace. It's all purposeful on their part. It's calculating. We're going to go down here. What are they doing? Defacing, marring. I couldn't keep going with it. All right. Damaging. Okay. To damage, we're going to go up a little bit. And here we go. This is SRA and MK Ultra. Traumatizing and terrorizing. What's the goal? They want to destroy the victim's future by forever altering her concept of God, of herself, of others, and life. Want to destroy your trust, your faith, and your hope, and the ability to love and be loved. This takes work on the part of the perp. These are not nice people. These are not innocent perpetrators. These are not, by the time you're doing this, and this is really important for people to see, the generational stuff where you take a kid or you take an adult that now is triggered in a childlike part, okay, where you have to go with this is this. Given your preference, given your druthers, would you have been a part of that? Of course you wouldn't. Then this doesn't pertain to you. The people that do this were never perped on, right? They may do harm, but they don't want to. These people want to, and therefore they were never perped on. They just, I'm going to go up. They just went through the levels. Why? Because they're evil, because their ego grew. The key to your freedom, the key to your healing is looking at the truth, which is people that do this were not hurt people, and they were victims themselves. They weren't. They're evil because they wanted to be, because they got off on it. Okay, we're going to look at the categories of sex offenders. This is unique to my work, just meaning this was me sitting down one day and saying, okay, we're going to match the different groups. Now in Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, we didn't do moderate intensity just because we didn't have the staff at the time. So we had a low intensity, high intensity. You have to do an assessment. We would use the Static 99. That's the most widely utilized risk assessment instrument. It is flawed, by the way, for pedophiles. How can I say it? Because I have the finding. I'm going to publish this at some point in time. But the Static 99, when it comes to pedophiles and men that have offended kids, it misses those that were given the designation of sexually violent predators. Only 25% of those are listed as high risk. And therefore, only 25% are put in high intensity, which means they're able to get out of treatment earlier. I mean, this is 1 year of treatment, this is 2 years. And they can get back in the community faster. So the Static 99 is horribly flawed when it comes to men who've offended against children. It's horrible, okay? And I've got the stats to prove it, okay? If anybody wants to do me, anybody in the field, let's do it. I'll show you the numbers, and you can, we'll come up with examples. As a matter of fact, we'll assess, how about Jeffrey Epstein, by the way? He would be rated as what? How about Weinstein? How about Sandusky? What risk level? If you know the Static 99, you know that I'm checkmating you, aren't I? Because you'll end up having to put them where? Okay, so Jeffrey Epstein, using the Static 99, would be listed as what? Low intensity. You're really going to tell me that Jeffrey Epstein is low intensity? Okay, moving along. So here's by degree. If you are going to match, here's kind of what you're going to find. So low intensity, you have the young and the dumb, ego-driven, Opportunist, self-styled playboy and stud, and self-absorbed and self-entitled. Okay. Um, these guys really need to be hit with the fact that they have to be hit with their selfishness. There's still some hope for these guys. These guys are never going to touch kids, by the way. Okay. But they'll end up being in the same sex offender treatment group as others that have. And so these are the guys, by the way, that want to harm, can't blame them, want to harm the kids, want to harm the offenders that hurt kids. And in a way, same here. So it's very interesting. And some of the high intensity guys as well, if they were the serial rapists and even murderers of adults, all of them want to hurt the pedophiles. It's kind of interesting. Okay, moderate intensity, emotionally manipulative. So you see what we have here. Here's the young and the dumb, the ego-driven, foolish person. So we got ego going on, self-absorbed. This is kind of narcissistic stuff. Okay. In a way, prison is enough to make these guys not come back, but they still need some insight, and they also need to understand about the impact they had on the victims. But this is where they manipulate their victims. And this guy may actually have fallen in love with the 15-year-old. It's just, I don't know. Okay, but here's the frat guys. It could be frat stuff. So this is well, obviously it's illegal. They've crossed lines. Okay, but society pumps these kind of guys up, and then they offend. Okay, moderate intensity, emotionally manipulative. Now we're getting into sociopathy. Sorry, I don't mean to move in the chart here. Views her as naive and foolish. So now he's working her. He's taking advantage of her. And this is what goes on inside of him. He views her as naive and foolish for trusting, and he takes her for granted. So he's finding it funny that she's falling in love with them. He has no intention. So this is a sweet-talking guy. Notches on his belt. Okay, emotionally cunning. Views her as stupid. Now you notice there's different. He thinks she's kind of naive. Now there's a difference in terms of character. This guy's really turning dark now. Because if you view her as stupid, now you're viewing her really as less than. This is just, well, I can't believe she fell for it. This is, well, because she's stupid, then she almost deserves it. There it is, deserving of being manipulated. This is the twisting effect right in here. Okay, emotionally calloused and perverted. We have problems. All of them are problems. Is there any hope? By the time some guy reaches here, good question. I don't think this person may never be coming back. So that means the rest of these are never coming back. Emotionally calloused and perverted, views her trust as weakness of character. This is predatorial. Now look at weakness of character. So trusting. See how he's inverted? He's already inverted by this time. So he's a psychopath. But will he be put? It depends upon the nature of the offense and also how many times he's been arrested. So he may deserve to be in high intensity, but depending upon the way the prison system has structured things, he may end up. If you don't have high intensity, this category may end up in low intensity. So it's pretty pathetic. So high intensity sex offender, power and control, calculated, conniving, depraved, warped, and twisted. This is a predator. Emotional vulnerability is viewed as an invitation, an opportunity. And here it is. This shows you how inverted. This is a psychopath. And so the psychopath believes they have a moral obligation to exploit. And if he doesn't take advantage, he can't live with himself, so to speak. He hates himself. I kicked myself. Why didn't I? How could I not have? Talking a really dark person. Yeah, it's almost, well, I've almost gotten to like you. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to do this to you kind of thing. Okay. To steal, defile, and destroy, diabolical, right? That means that's devil-like, vile, malevolent, and sadistic. So here's SRA and K ultra in here. Emotional vulnerability is viewed as repulsive and with disdain. That's why they have no empathy. Moving down, this just shows you when we're talking about SVPs, This is the prison population right in here. 1% of the nation is in prison. So it shows you of the overall prison population, the vast majority of the prison population wants to harm those that have harmed children. Okay, so look how bad you have to be to get to a point where you are looking to harm a child. You are so far gone. You are so far outside the norm. If any normal pastor's looking at this is the guy that's going to come out of prison and come to your church because he's been learning all the terminology. Or this was the pastor, this was the elder, this was the priest, this was the bishop, this was the cardinal. Okay. This was the mason. This was the politician. Okay. You need to understand how it takes a lot of work to reach this point. You are so much of a freak of nature, but a deviant, dangerous individual. Okay. This is the Jeffrey Epstein kind of stuff. Okay. At least in that category, SVPs. Okay. What other? Okay. So that brings us up to speed with those different, those charts. Now we're going to go into looking at a couple of categories right now of psychopaths, and then we're going to look at our film. Okay, so let me get out of this in the background here. Sorry, just a moment. So what I wanted people to see, sorry, my computer is slow in the background, is we're going to look at what are called factors. Sorry, what I'm going to do is, sorry about that. Now I can see it. Okay, I'm going to scroll up for a second. We're actually going to see some of those charts. Okay, I'll zoom in. Sorry, watch your eyes. I'm scrolling up. What we're going to look at, first of all, what are the categories of a psychopath? How do you assess a psychopath? I'm not going to suggest anybody assess, clinically assess, but I'll show you what is involved in assessing. We're going to first start with the PCLR, the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. So you see down there. Okay, Robert Hare out of the University of British Columbia is the one to have come up with that. He did a pretty decent job. This is, quote unquote, the gold standard of forensic assessments. I am certified in this. And what it is an in-person interview. Now, where are these going to be given? They're going to be given to men in the criminal justice system. Why? Because who else is going to admit they're a psychopath? So it's looking at what they call two factors with quote unquote facets in each. And there's some logic behind this. So they're going to look at, so Robert Hare did a good job, right? But there's some additional things I'm going to show what really needs to be factored in, especially to understand MK Ultra and SRA. So you're going to look at the person's quote unquote interpersonal having to do with how are they with relationships with other people? So what you're going to find is a psychopath is able to be charming. Glibness means very, happy-go-lucky. Okay, very interesting, right? Because you can see a bloody psychopath is not going to have this really. Or shall we say the snatch and grab kind of stranger danger. So if you understand superficial charm, you can make your way into positions of authority and trust and respect. Grandiose sense of self-worth, what does that mean? What does it look like? Really good self-esteem. Now, whacked out, but there ain't nothing wrong with that person. This is the kind of person that is able to be in front of a crowd, is able to be confident, is able to portray himself as not just charming, but you can see how this kind of person would easily be a pastor. So he loves greeting people. He loves working the crowd. And he's able to do what? As a matter of fact, think of a politician. Thank you. He's a pathological liar. What does that mean? He's lying. It doesn't hurt him. I mean, of course it hurt, right? But just pathological, meaning he lies and lies, and that's all he ever does. And by the way, people have said they believe their own lies. That is not true, okay? Because they know the difference. And when they're ever cornered, they'll just hop, right? When they know they'll never admit you're right. Okay, so a true psychopath will never say, "Okay, I'm sorry, I was lying." No, they'll just sidestep. They do the Watusi, It is Teflon Bill Clinton. Okay, James Fallon does a good job when he has identified Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, by the way, but Bill Clinton as a white-collar psychopath. Robert Hare used Bernie Madoff of the former of NASDAQ, okay, in finance. Okay, so think about in sales. So first, self-esteem. So he's a narcissist right here. And then he's learned the art of winning friends, influencing people. That's sales. He'll sell ice cubes to an Eskimo, a bridge to nowhere, whatever it is. And there it is, conning and manipulative. So that's why they're so good at sales. So sociopathy, psychopathy, we've got some overlap here. How about the kind of emotions, lack of remorse or guilt? 100% correct. He just doesn't have a guilt. Why? Now, this is where people will differ. Those of us that have worked with psychopaths, I believe I am right. There's my granddad. No, I'll tell you why. Everybody else, and we'll see that, they'll assume because it gets too uncomfortable. This one, it's really uncomfortable if we say how you become a psychopath is you override your conscience. Well, can you be a researcher dealing with psychopathy and you yourself, look at James Fallon, right, and have no guilt? Nobody wants to say they're a psychopath. So what they say is, you know what, they were born that way. Well, unless you can take a film and then follow, unless you can take a film of an infant, nobody does that. So it's conjecture. So the question is, how did they get to the point where there's no remorse or guilt? And my contention is they're not born that way. Okay, it happens over time. And could it be that by the things I do and the way I live and how I approach things, could I be affecting brain structure? Yeah, you can affect white matter. That's the bundles of nerves or collection of nerves. Okay, emotionally shallow. This is Hollywood. This is a politician, right? They can pretend because they're up here, superficial charm, but nothing bothers them. Nothing gets under their skin. There is one thing when you deny them what they want, but it's just Hollywood. It's classic. Callous and lack of empathy. They just don't care about the impact. So here's no remorse, no empathy, and no guilt. Okay? Failure to accept responsibility for his own actions for dumping knapsacks. Okay, so it's not failure to accept. They're sidestepping. They never will. So they're not about to. So it's not so much failure. Now, the impulsive ones, but the more sophisticated you get, I'd have to reword this, but think about impulsive ones. And that really is the demarcation as we saw last time. Okay, now so you can see this has to do with other people. This has to do with lifestyle and in the world. So you're going to kind of look at how do they deal with relating to other people? How are they with other people? And how are they with the world? Okay, lifestyle, the need for stimulation, proneness to boredom. I would say the time you're going to see this is with the lower level impulsive ones. How about if you run for political office? That means you're sitting at a desk, or you don't need a lot of stimulation because you're calculating, you're conniving. Okay, so I would say the lower level psychopaths, yes, the higher level, they're never bored. Okay, they're always strategizing. So this is where if someone hasn't dealt with and thought through a lot of the issues of psychopathy, they will say, well, no, and so they'll score somebody lower. As a matter of fact, if you were to assess Jeffrey Epstein, he wouldn't be given a lot of this superficial chart. We could actually score him, right? Because he was never bored. Parasitic lifestyle? No, he had a bunch of cash. He's not living off of other people. Now, the drug addict, right, is. So look at the lifestyle. Jeffrey Epstein, we would say, well, no. He was fairly content. Bill Clinton, no, they're content. Okay, parasitic lifestyle. No, he has his own money. So if you have cash, right, we could probably come up with some other things, but all things being equal, right? Jeffrey Epstein was not parasitic. We try to make a case, but no, he owns his own island and stuff. He's inviting people. People are parasites to him in a way. That's why they wanted to go over there. They're brown nosing. Okay, Jeffrey Epstein, he worked people and he blackmailed people. That's different. Lack of realistic long-term goals. You can tell me that Jeffrey Epstein lacked long-term goals? No way. He was calculating. Jeffrey Epstein was not impulsive, but you can see again, the lower level impulsive kind of psychopaths that we talked about before, those are the lone wolves. These are the ones that get arrested. So in prison, so Robert Hare did what? He was looking at the category, this is important. He was looking at the category of people in prison, so you're going to tend to see this, but he wasn't looking at those that run Davos, those that run the World Health Organization, those that they had Jeffrey Epstein's, right? Those that are in politics, those that are in finance, those that are district attorneys that are perping on kids. So the sophisticated kind that do SRA and MK Ultra kind of stuff, if you don't have an ability to really understand what psychopathy is, potentially you're going to use, if you're a clinician, you're going to rate them low on psychopathy, because look at how many out of 20 items, 5 really don't pertain. So you've already basically said they're not a psychopath. And how about antisocial? So in terms of lifestyle, you're going to miss the worst. Antisocial, poor behavioral control. You cannot tell me Jeffrey Epstein had poor behavioral control. He was very good. How about Bill Clinton? He's very controlled. That's why we're throwing off. How about the priests in the Catholic Church? Right? When you find somebody, everybody says, what? No, not him. It's because they don't fit these categories. Early behavioral problems. Okay. That's the impulsive guys. But the sophisticated psychopaths, they didn't have early behavioral problems. That's why they were able to gain trust. Juvenile delinquency. This is actually, when it comes to the sophisticated guys, this doesn't exist. Revocation of conditional release. That means they were arrested. They weren't. The low-level psychopaths, yes. That's why they fit ASP, antisocial personality disorder, and criminal versatility. They can do all sorts of things. So we could say Jeffrey Epstein had criminal versatility, but we're talking about with this, they changed their modus operandi as they're doing criminal stuff. So the sophisticated kind of psychopaths, the perpetrators that we're talking about, according to PCLR, that the perpetrators that do the greatest harm are not psychopaths, according to PCLR. Well, they are 100%, because they have no guilt, no conscience, no remorse. Okay. Now, items that do not have any saturation fat, that's stats, promiscuous sexual behavior. Now that's interesting, right? We could talk, okay, that's an impulsive guy, or meaning they have no intention of being sticking with one person in terms of fidelity in many short-term marital relationships. Okay, that's not true. Look at Bill. Don't tell me that Bill and Hillary like each other. Okay, so we're going to go down to, so there would be the Hare psychopathy checklist. It's looking for those categories. Sorry, my computer's catching up. I will increase so you can see the questions you would actually ask. I won't go, you can actually you can just Google this, so to speak. Okay. So this is what you're looking for. Actually, there's a series of questions, but here would be the categories. So is this person superficial? If he is, you're going to say, yep, definitely present, possibly present, definitely absent. Now, the question is this. If a person is a really, really adept psychopath, are they going to show any impulsivity? No. So it really comes down to, how about any juvenile delinquency? No. I tell you what, you're probably, think about Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, by the time he was arrested, how long had he been perping? So none of this is present. And so unless you have an understanding of psychopathy, then all you're going to do by virtue of, now you're going to do a records review, but you're going to be interviewing and looking through the records, right? So a really good psychopath can do what? As a matter of fact, there's a book called How to Pass the PCLR. And so it coaches, written by an attorney, it coaches someone how to pass that. Okay, I'm going to scroll down now. Okay, now I was looking at, and I would recommend, but there's a few challenges. in this sense. I'm going to decrease this because I'm going to show you where this comes from. It would be worth your while if somebody wants to do a little bit of research to go to the U.S. Department of Justice. Right, here we go. Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, Tracking. They call it SMART, but U.S. Department of Justice. Okay, sorry about my computer. There we go. Okay, so there is an overview of quote unquote typologies or the categories of sex offenders. And so this particular sentence, I'm not going to belabor it just because I'm aware of the time. Okay, but it's pretty good, but it misses some of the more sophisticated kinds that we're focusing on. But it looks at typologies such as a child abuser, fixed, regressed, the ones that quote unquote fall in love with the kids. That is not true, by the way. Okay, so some of these, what you'll find is this was the result of meta-analysis. So they're reading the studies of other people. Okay, so I just kind of direct your attention to that. That would be worth your while, for familiarization. But it's not really going to highlight the most sophisticated of kinds that we're talking about, because the thing to really keep in mind with, and now we're going to look at the brains. Okay. But the thing to keep in mind is the more sophisticated somebody is, the less impulsive they are, the more methodical they are, the more they look unlike what we all think are monsters. Now, think about SRA and MK Ultra. That's exactly the person that harmed you. Okay? And that's why people missed the red flags, the warning signs, because they looked so normal. Okay, we're going to look at for about 12 minutes, and then we're going to start to wrap up. There are some video clips I want to show you. It comes out of this, The Neuroscience of Real-Life Monsters, Psychopaths, CEOs, and Politicians. And it comes from this website, Science on Tap or WA. Okay, the one we're going to look at is right here, The Neuroscience of Real-Life Monsters. That's right. Here's the title of it. Okay, so look for that thumbnail. Now, I want to give a caution. This guy's really good when it comes to neuroscience. He's rotten when it comes to picking out, as far as the application. He has a thing against Donald Trump. Now, different people, I'm not going to say a political statement. I'm just going to, or Republican, Democrat. I'm not talking about that. I'm just going to, from someone that works with psychopaths, I'm going to tell you the reality. Can you have someone who looks unflappable, who comes across brash, comes across being able to say things about people, who is not a psychopath? Yeah. If you enter the political fray, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a psychopath. You better have thick skin. If you're going in, if you have thick skin, does it mean you're a psychopath? No. It means you're calm. Okay. If you're unflappable, does it mean you're a psychopath? No. It means you are mindful and you can manage yourself. If you can, metaphorically, if you can get in the ring with somebody else, does that mean you're a psychopathic gladiator? Not necessarily. If you know the only way to prevent the psychopaths that are running the world is to get in the ring with them, and you're aware of their tactics, what do you think they're going to call you? Right? They're going to flip the script. And so you can't just conclude something from somebody's personal presence or persona, right? Hopefully you understand that by now. So if someone says, Donald Trump's a psychopath, okay, I would ask, how do you know that? Well, look, he calls names. Okay. He just looks like one. What's one look like? Well, he's able to get in there and he's heartless. Why? Because he says, you're fired? Okay, it all depends, right? He may not have tact. So if you're going to conclude from somebody's public presentation, if you think that's enough, you're wrong. Because what would you conclude about Bill Clinton prior to Monica Lewinsky? You'd say, well, no, not Bill, because he's got that pouty lip and he looks sad. He can even get tearful. Okay, so it's not the public presentation That's the thing. You have to go behind the scenes and beneath the surface. One of the things you're going to look for is birds of a feather. Okay. So what you do is, if there's any conflict, you look at who's lining up behind who. And the last time I checked, the Hollywood elite, the music industry, the world elite, how do they feel about Donald Trump? They don't like him. Okay, that's a big part of all I need to know. Show me your enemies, and then I'll start. Maybe they're aware that if he gets into office, because when was the Jeffrey Epstein? When was Epstein finally? When did the whole thing come to pass? Oh, when Trump was in office. Who has been the hardest, as far as which president of the US has been the hardest on child trafficking? Who wanted to build the wall? You look at what they do, and it sure seems like all those that are into child trafficking, all those that, everybody that comes to our minds, they really don't like Donald Trump because he's pushing for stiffer sentences against pedophiles. Well, that's a little, why are you going to do that if you're actually a psychopath that you're harming people? So, anyways, I throw that out for your consideration. I recommend you watch this video, but this guy just hates Donald Trump. So he kind of is shaping this around Donald Trump. So I take issue with that. He got to stick. This guy's a neuroscientist. He got to stop. Well, he references two books written by people that hate Donald Trump. One was Trump's niece. And the guy says this, and I'm sorry, who is I should know this, the little author. I'm going to scroll up so we can see him. It is, there we go, Dr. Octavia Choi, okay, is who we're going to be listening to. What he says is this, that Donald Trump's niece wrote a book exposing Donald Trump, and here's what Dr. Choi said. I kind of believe her, because why would she have a reason to lie? Okay, so his material, so that's why I'm just prefacing it, because when you go on, if you go on and listen to the whole thing, he's going to keep flashing pictures of Trump. I think he's way off base. But all that aside, his information about neuroscience and what goes on in the brain of psychopath is stellar. What he's going to do, he's going to show us different clips. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let him now talk about it. So let me get out of this, if I can figure out how to do this. Maybe I decrease this, and bear with me, everyone, if I can. Every now and then this happens. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay, I'm going to get out of this. There we are again. And now we're going to see the clip. I'm aware of the time. This is about a 10-minute clip. I'll try not to stop it too often, but I want to show you that it's nobody's opinion any longer that there's such a thing as psychopathy. Okay, so I have taken clips from this video. It's again Dr. Choi. He is with Stanford University. So we're going to look at the neuroscience. So aside from him continuing to focus on Donald Trump, so if you watch it, you're going to see all this. Okay, so we're going to allow him to stay in his lane and talk about psychopathy. So I highly recommend it. Here's the title of his talk, right? The Neuroscience of Real Life Monsters, Psychopaths, CEOs, and Politicians. And I muted that. I just wanted this as sort of a thumbnail. It's now going to switch. There we go. That's what you will see when you go on that site. You can see on YouTube. It's going to be up there. Okay, and we're just about ready. Oh, you know what? Here we are.
So I am a forensic neuropsychiatrist with a background in neuroscience. I have a PhD in neuroscience. I'm really interested in how neuroscience affects court proceedings. And psychopathy and the neuroscience of psychopathy is related to that interest. Now, when you define psychopathy like that, it's nice because it's reproducible, it's standardized, so then you can start running lots of studies.
John, I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, there you go. How's this?
There we go.
That was
Now I
because
can hear you.
that was because I was running my mouth on mute. Can you hear? Sorry about that. Here, I thought I was waxing
Great.
out. Can you hear the audio of this?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Okay, never mind. Okay, off we go.
Wait, now I can't hear it. I could hear it before.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. Sorry, everybody. You can see we're doing this. Emma, why don't you let me get out of this, or maybe I'm sorry. Okay, you've given me control, as it were. Let me see if I share a screen. I don't see. There's usually a little button. Everybody, bear with us. Okay, maybe is it okay? I think okay. Video settings. It's not video settings. Everybody bear with us. This is live and unscripted audio settings. Isn't that funny? Because there are those little buttons that we're supposed to check. I don't want to waste anybody's time. Dang it, this was going to be good, but I can't remember. And, oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Okay, folks, thank you for bearing. Zoom has changed its format.
It has.
Right? Okay, so Emma, tell me if we can hear it now.
Psychopaths represent 1% of the male population over 18, but they're between 15 and 25% of male prisoners, right? So basically, there are a lot more. This 1% makes up about a fifth of all prisoners in the United States, at least. And most of those prisoners are in there for violent offenses. They're kind of sweet talking, right? So they're charming and glib. So they have this facility with language. So they're more likely to be early released. They can sweet talk the parole board, right?
Okay, let me stop real fast. That's super important to know, because if somebody's doing groundbreaking research by going from an academic setting, so an academic researcher, we're going to interview inmates, sex offenders. What did he just say? They can sweet talk. So if you take at face value with any ability to corroborate the information that a psychopath or a sex offender gives you, then you may very well likely be being sucked in to their lie, and they're using you. In this case, they're practicing for parole, and they want to get into the data that you're going to produce false narratives that are going to benefit them.
But they're also a lot more likely to recidivate, right? So basically,
Okay, sorry. I'm going to reserve the right to jump in. I won't make it too long. He's talking about the impulsive kind. Okay, the impulsive kind, yes. The sophisticated kind, they're not likely to recidivate because they're going to once again get into positions of power while they're perping. He's talking about, see the 3-to-1 cycling? He'll describe that. This is primarily the impulsive psychopath.
As soon as they're released early, they'll often commit a crime immediately, go right back into prison. So because of that, there's this 3-to-1 cycling. Compared to a non-psychopath in prison, a psychopathic prisoner will be in and out 3 times for every 1 time a non-psychopathic prisoner goes in and out. And because of this, it's estimated that they commit 50% of all violent crimes. I'm very impressed by these statistics. I'm going to show it to you visually. So again, psychopaths represent 1% of the general male population, but they are 20% of male prisoners.
By the way, I actually think there are more psychopaths. Robert Hare did that, but think about the Hare psychopathy checklist. So if you take those 20 items, yep, about 1%. I think it's much, much higher, to be honest. And therefore, in the prison population, it's probably higher as well.
And because there is so much cycling in and out, because they leave the prison and they come right back because they just commit a new crime immediately, they go in and out 3 times more often than a non-psychopathic prisoner.
Sorry. The fact that he would say that, they go right out and commit a crime, that tells me he's never dealt with. Not faulting him, but again, he needs to stay in his lane. So the sophisticated ones do not come right back. Okay.
And because of that, this 1% of the general male population is thought to commit half of all violent crimes. Okay, so the categories I have that are kind of neuroscience informed are a bunch of these things about psychopaths have to do with impaired emotional processing, lacking empathy, needing constant stimulation, kind of not learning from their mistakes and making the same mistakes over and over again, having a shallow affect and lacking remorse. These are all can be described by certain brain impairments that affect emotional processing. So the amygdala this is your brain. This is the temporal lobe of your brain. And the amygdala is right here. It's an almond-shaped nucleus. Amygdala comes from the Latin root almond. And it's right in front of the hippocampus, which is our main memory structure in our brain. So, the amygdala, is sort of our fear center. And that's an oversimplification, but it's true to a first approximation. That when you feel fear or kind of some sense of threat, your amygdala gets highly active. So the amygdala.
By the way, for every trauma survivor, that's what's happened. Your amygdala got just whacked out. So trying to heal the amygdala, we're going to rewire things ultimately. But the amygdala is where a lot of the trauma response comes from.
Is a highly connected structure. Everything, basically, this is a diagram of brain connectivity, and the amygdala is in the center. And these are all the different brain areas your amygdala is connected to. Basically, everything feeds into the amygdala, and the amygdala in turn feeds into many brain areas. So it senses a lot of information, and then it can do a lot of things in your brain. And what does your amygdala do? It sounds the alarms, right? It signals your hypothalamus for physiological arousal, like to make your heart beat faster, get more blood pumping to your muscles. It activates the.
Think about a panic attack. Okay, something's triggered the amygdala, but thoughts or things on the inside or outside with your five senses.
The adrenaline and the cortisol endocrine system. It activates your hippocampus, so you start to remember things, because when you're under threat, that's a really good thing to remember, so that you can avoid situations like that in the future. So your memory systems are activated, right? Lots of cognitive arousal systems in your brain are also activated. And it activates an aversive emotion in your body, right? It's this aversive emotion that makes you want to move away from whatever the thing is that's threatening. So that's what your amygdala does. But, the thing about psychopaths is that they have smaller and less active amygdala. So instead of having a yappy chihuahua, they have some chihuahua that looks like this. And when your amygdala is not very active, it's sort of like there's a dimmer switch on all this stuff. It's like an emotional dimmer switch where they're just not sensing emotions or threats around it or pain, things like that as vividly.
And think about, he just called it a dimmer switch. Interesting. Could it be that as you violate your conscience, turning the volume down on your conscience, what happens? Interesting thought.
Right. So they're less anxious and they have less fear, right? When your amygdala is not very active, you're not really, it's sounding, the alarm systems are very low, right? So you're constantly bored, right? That's why, this need for stimulation is one of the characteristics of psychopaths. And it's also why they use drugs a lot, because they're looking for that sensation, right? And it also explains impaired punishment learning. Let's get into that now. So key deficit for psychopathy is impaired punishment learning. They don't learn from painful mistakes. Right? So this is what's happening in your brain, right? So here's the amygdala, right? And here's another part of the brain, which I'm going to introduce, called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. And these two structures are connected by a fiber bundle called the uncinate fasciculus. Basically, when inside the brain of, let's say you're inside of this kid's brain, this kid just scratched the other kid, and the mama said, don't do that, and said it in a harsh tone of voice that made the baby realize that was a bad thing to do. The amygdala activates and registers an aversive emotion. That aversive emotion, right, is then the amygdala sends that signal to the VMPFC, which understands the context. I scratched my brother. And so this combination of the aversive emotion and this context is stored as an emotional memory. Now, it's interesting. Psychopaths have small.
Now, you notice what he just said, an emotional memory. So when you've been, quote unquote, programmed, what did they do? They paired things together. So that's why it's on a deep feeling level. That's where the work has to take place, by the way, for healing from trauma.
Amygdala, and they're more underactive. We talked about that, right? But their VMPFC is also less active and smaller. So psychopaths are less able to store aversive emotional memories. So they don't learn from punishment, and they don't develop social inhibitions. They don't develop that kind of database of emotional linkages, right? It just that emotional memory system is just defective. So they don't have this moral autopilot, which is why direct deterrence doesn't work, and they don't learn from their painful mistakes, and they recidivate frequently. So Robert Hare described this kind of 20 factors that make up a psychopath, but if you could describe it in one phrase, it's basically, and he wrote this book called Without Conscience. So what is a psychopath? It's this complicated set of 20 factors, or stated simply, you can say a psychopath is someone who is without conscience. But what is the conscience, right? Now, the fascinating thing is we know a lot about how the conscience is instantiated by brain activity because of this wonderful machine called an MRI that can, with the fMRI, we can scan brain activity. And so there are actually 4 different literatures that all point to this structure, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. So here's the brain, and the medial, the brain has 2 halves, and so there's a medial surface to the brain. So ventral means underneath and medial means in the middle, right? So this ventral medial prefrontal cortex, here's another view of it, right, is really ground central for the conscience. Without a ventral medial prefrontal cortex, you cannot have a conscience. And the literatures that all point, separate literatures that all point to this structure as being a critical brain structure for the conscience. There's a whole literature about moral reasoning. So when you kind of solve moral dilemmas, this part of your brain is highly active, and we'll talk about that. The psychopathic literature, Ken Keel and R.J.R. Blair, I had to kind of have really fleshed out that this is a structure that's highly defective in psychopaths. And I recently had the pleasure of meeting R.J.R. Blair, and I invited him to his talk. So he might be out there listening to this talk.
Now, when he says defective, it simply means there's not a lot of activity. So my contention is it's not necessarily defective. It's just there's no activity. Big difference. It's not brain damage.
If he is, I'm honored to have you. The traumatic brain injury literature, people who have had this part of their brain damaged, so Phineas Gage, many of you guys know Phineas Gage, the railroad foreman who had a tamping iron kind of that went through his brain and damaged this area, which basically turns people into instant psychopaths. And then there's a dementia literature. There's slowly dementing conditions like frontal temporal dementia, which affects this brain area, and people become immoral over time. So let's talk a little bit about the neuroscience of moral decision-making. And the main person who does this is Josh Green, who basically sticks people in scanners and gives them moral dilemmas. And then he looks at their brain activity to figure out which parts of the brain are important to solve moral dilemmas. And then in contrast, there's another circuit that does emotional reasoning, right? And that's anchored by the VMPFC that can process the social context and then generate an aversive emotion, the sense of horror. Right. So, in these kind of, the crying baby example, right, the math works out. The abstract reasoning part of your brain says, you know what, I kill one baby, but I save everyone else, right? Otherwise, everyone dies, right? So the math works out to go ahead and smother that baby. So the reasoning part of your brain, right, saying go, but the social emotion part of your brain, right, saying, no, I don't think I could do that. That just feels too horrible, right? And then every time there's a conflict between two competing goals, the ACC snaps into place. The ACC is sort of like a CEO in your brain, a very high-level executive in your brain that gets consulted when the lower levels of the brain are having a conflict. And the ACC tries to solve that conflict by saying either do it or don't do it. So it's reasons versus emotions, right? For a lot of us, no matter how strong the reasons are, our emotions stop us. So even if there were 100 people in that basement, right? So, and if you killed your own baby, you could save 100 people, right? Most of us still probably couldn't do it because the sense of horror is such a strong stop signal. But psychopaths, it's interesting, have defective VMPFCs, right? So, this area of the brain isn't quite as active, so they feel less of a sense of horror, right?
Can you notice how he just said they're defective, but they're not active, that part of the brain? So I would take issue with him. He needs to correct his terminology. It's not defective, it's just not active. Now the question is, why isn't there any activity? My contention is they've overridden their conscience to a point where it's no longer working.
Meaning that the stop signal is less intense. Meaning that for psychopaths, if you ask a psychopath what they're going to do in that situation, they're going to say, I'm going to smother the baby. And why is everyone so upset at me? It just makes sense. So the VMPFC is a key area for the conscience. And I would argue that the conscience is composed of 3 different functions that the VMPFC participates in. So the VMPFC, on the other hand, right, the structure we've been talking about so much,
helps us to understand what other people might be feeling, right? It's the basis for empathy. So when someone is feeling something, right, we automatically can feel what they're feeling, right? So the VMPFC helps us kind of attune to other people's feelings. Now, psychopaths have intact DMPFCs, so they're able to mentalize just fine, right? So they're really good at lying and manipulation. But their VMPFC is less active, right, and defective. So they have impaired empathy. For them, other people are just like objects. They're not people, right? So a famous psychopathy researcher said, psychopaths know the words, but not the music. So that's why they're fearless, right? On the other hand, and I know R.J.R. Blair, if you're out there, he's done a lot of research that shows that that contradicts this, but so the literature is complicated. But there is at least some literature that shows that people who are psychopathic have very overly active nucleus accumbens. So donuts look super good to them, right? So they're highly hedonic, meaning that they really go for immediate gratification. So when you consider that, psychopaths have an
hedonic also, think about hedonism. So it's not so much immediate gratification, but they want what they want and they're going to go for it.
Develop VMPFC, and they have a underactive amygdala, so they're fearless, and an overactive nucleus accumbens. That's a bad combination, right? If you're fearless, hedonic, and have a poorly formed executive, then you're a
Sorry. Okay. I didn't realize it was so abrupt. I think that's the end of it. So those are some clips I would recommend going and watching that video. Be prepared. He's going to call really inappropriately, in my estimation. Even though I may or may not like certain people, I'm not going to sit there and, gosh. Okay. So just be prepared. He dumps on Donald Trump. I'm not telling you whether I like Donald Trump or not, but I'm telling you, there is not the indication to draw what he is drawing from just the public presentation. I look at, to be real honest, I'm going to look at, okay, birds of a feather. You show me who's friends with you or you're friends with. Now, again, you can be working with, but show me who is going up against you. That's going to tell me a lot. And so I look at, just ask this question. How do those who are involved in the most high level of human and sexual trafficking, who would we think we're going to put those, and how do they tend to speak of Donald Trump? They all hate him. They all hate him. Okay, Donald Trump, if you're into child trafficking and you're a psychopath, are you going to erect a border that nobody's getting across? Or are you going to make a porous border for smuggling of sex trafficking? The border is the greatest way to protect against child trafficking. What was the big thing that Donald Trump is all about? And he did more to convict and to increase the focus on sex trafficking. So Epstein was tried or captured under Donald Trump. So those are the facts, whether you like him or not. So you look at the people that hate Donald Trump, and I don't know, it's all those people that are into child trafficking. So it's like, you know what? It's 1,000,000 against one in the public forum. It's like, there's must be something. When all the child traffickers hate one guy, it's like, I'm going to risk believing that maybe they hate him for a reason. He's ruining their good thing. On that note, Emma, I think we have probably covered about as much as we need to, hopefully to give people a sense of, are the people really capable, able, and willing to be evil enough to do MK Ultra, to do SRA? And the answer is yes. So forensically speaking, it is not only possible, but it is, you have people that are likely able to do it. So it's not anybody's imagination that it's a very real category of predators.
Thank you so much, Jon, for all that you presented tonight. That was so helpful, and I really loved this deep dive into the predator mindset and sort of what, I don't even want to say causes it, but leads somebody to do that, And I think also, like, in addition to understanding I can understand also why so many of my guests are very empathetic sometimes towards wanting healing for their abusers versus the public, which is usually, if they haven't gone through this, it's kind of like, oh, let's go kill everybody and, go after all these people. And it's like, of course there has to be justice, but when you really understand, like how horrible some of these people's lives have to be in order for them to do that. And then also whenever you understand the opposite and sort of, what can cause somebody to sort of go down that route during their life. I think it's really like how you were saying, just with like letting go of shame and guilt. It's also really good to have just an understanding of it so we don't get super emotional about stuff and we can think logically about it at the same time. And just have a really good overview of this topic. So thank you so much. And I'm excited to dive deeper into this and to go deeper into the parts and systems. That was fantastic. And if you want to send me the link to, if that's a video that people can access that you
That's
shared,
right.
I'm happy to put that in the show notes for people too.
And yeah, kind of in summary, is what you just said, Emma. Probably the thing I really want people to take away is, so the researcher, Dr. Choi from Stanford, kept saying, well, they have a damaged portion of their brain. Okay, what he means is there's little activity. Now the question is, how did that get to that point? So we know it's not working very well, so they call it damaged. My contention is this, and so I really want people to take heart and let it sink in, that those adults that want to perpetrate SRA and MK Ultra, think about, let that sink in, right? Now you've separated those that were triggered and still participating versus those that wanted to. Those that wanted to were never abused. It's really important to let that sink in. That's how evil these people are. I'll emphasize it again. Those that get off on and really want to and look forward to it, they have brains of psychopaths because they wanted to be that way. And it doesn't bother them. You show this to a psychopath, they have no interest. They don't care.
Well, we really appreciate you, Jon. And it's like I said, it's neat too, getting to learn from both sides of the spectrum through your experiences. You have had such a diverse career path in where you've gone, since you've gone down the counseling path and the therapeutic path, getting to see both ends of the spectrum from the severely traumatized to the extreme predator. It's really neat to sort of see that too and to get to learn that from you. So again, I just really thank you. You spend a lot of time doing these things for free. You come on here and you create these awesome graphs for us and these visuals and these charts, which I've also had people in the comments ask if you can make them public somehow or like into a PDF. So just going to put that out there in case you're able to put it on a website or something.
Matter of fact, some of this chart, the one that we worked through, is currently on churchprotect.org.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we dive into that? Let's
There you go.
share.
As a matter of fact, I'll tell people where they can find it. And at some point in time, I'll put it out as a PDF. So I'll work on that. No, in all sincerity, I'll work on that. If you go under, so this churchprotect.org, this has my my training material, so to speak, under Truths About Predators. So if you click on that, then this is where I'm actually putting this portion of that series. So if you scroll down just a little ways, you're going to see a couple different things and keep scrolling. So here's our series that Em and I are doing right now. And there's the full chart.
Cool.
Oh, okay, that's the full chart right there. Now I'll try to figure out how to make it available. Maybe Emma and I, you and I together, we can figure out maybe on your channel, but at least there's a clear copy. And feel free to take a screenshot of it. And so it's all right there. So that's how you get to it, along with these. So this portion of our series, the one that we're doing on psychopaths, can be found on this tab.
Perfect. And this is on Church Protect. And is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with this site?
With that one, under the Insights tab, that you'll see what I do with some social media. This is sort of my repository of some of the social media that I do. It's not every single one, but and I call them soundbite curriculum, so educational thing. And then if you want to find out about my whistleblowing against the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, I'm the reason they don't use solitary confinement any longer. It's right there. And the DOC went after me pretty big time. They wanted me to do prison time because of that. So it's kind of intriguing. But that was 8 years ago now. And I still have 2 active clinical licenses. By the way, you cannot be licensed as a clinician if you have been charged. No, I'm convicted. Right? Anybody can charge anybody with anything. If you've been convicted, found guilty of something, you can't be a clinician with a felony. You can't hold one active state license. I have 2 active state licenses. So that the proof is in the pudding, shall we say. Okay, so that's the one site. The next is my primary site, that is SurvivorSupport.net. This is where I recommend every survivor go, because this is a resource. Start from left to right. You'll then have a lot of material to go through. Our series, Emma, you and me, our series on parts, but abbreviated. So if somebody wants the full episodes, they have to go to your podcast, especially the question and answers. So the abbreviated versions are under the 3rd tab. So help for the journey. It's the 4th tab down, the impact of trauma. Okay, so on the site, you have access to my podcasts. That actually is my counseling podcast, Journey to Healing, from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday night. And doing a series currently under the series of, or the rubric of, or umbrella of boundaries, we're focusing on, that's right, and that's where you can see it live if you want. So every Friday night, I'm right there. But if you want to go back and see past programs, it's under the podcast tab. If anybody wants to contact me, and I do counseling, but I call it personal consulting. Let me clarify that. There's a qualifier. So there's the repository of past programs under the podcast tab. So we're doing a series on forgiveness, what it is and what it is not, emphasis on what it is not. That's going to be good for survivors to go through to recognize the difference between true versus false guilt. False guilt is shame. Every survivor is shame-based. If you go back to the home tab, if anybody would like me to work with them on what I call a consulting basis, the difference between being a therapist versus a personal consultant is, as a personal consultant, I don't have to diagnose you. You aren't given a mental health diagnosis. I don't bill insurance. I don't do a treatment plan, and I don't therefore have to keep case notes on you. Okay, so personal consulting, though, is not billed by insurance. It is a good way for you to meet with me. So we schedule a time and we just begin to work through things. So how you do that is you scroll down on the page just a little bit and you will see the little tab down there. There you go. So schedule here. And Emma was nice enough to post. We have a nice, a classy redneck lady. That's such a nice promo that she gave. And so I'm very appreciative. I should send my thanks to her. So that's just that was such a pleasant thing. That was a neat surprise. Okay, so that's survivor support. There's a lot of things under the insights tab, so that'll take you a long time to go through that. A lot of good material. And it's all designed to help clarify and give you information and insights to help with your journey to healing. The next website would be Unmasking the Trans Movement. Again, it seems like a different topic, but it's all about how to keep women and children safe. Trans movement is the world's greatest predatory scheme, scam, and ruse, targeting the most vulnerable. So this is a good source of quality clinical information. We've got episodes, and I forget how many we have, each a 30-minute episode. We're into the 70s now, so that's available to you. I also have a blog that is SurvivorSupport.us. You can get to that, either through Survivor Support or just type in SurvivorSupport.us. And again, the majority of the articles or blog posts on there are dealing with sexual predators. And then I guess we have YouTube. We have 2 that I think are noteworthy. One is mine. And so everything I do kind of in chronological order. If you want to see what I've just recently, you can top left, moving your way down. So anything I do, I really put on YouTube. I have all the originals in case, or if or when YouTube finally kicks me off. I'm hoping they don't, but I always have the originals. Or you can go under playlists. I've tried to organize them. I'm a little behind that. So I've tried to organize them. There you go. Into healing from DID. There's the series that we're doing. So, and then Journey to Healing over on the right. Unmasking the Trans Movement has its own YouTube channel exactly by that title. And so there is the same. And then last but not least, I guess, would be my Twitter. Emma, you're always good to remind me. I do have a Twitter. I do that all the time. So there we go. And there are different links. So if anybody ever wants to get a hold of me. And so if something comes to my mind each day or something, if I see a news article, this was sent to me. So here we go. You know, we've got the World Economic Forum. They finally come out with it. We all sort of knew they would. So they are now putting it out there that the pedophiles should be added to the growing alphabet soup list of LGBTQ. So James Cantor has been used heavily, deviant sexologist, same thing for James Bailey, who they also defend AGPs, which is just a fancy way of saying a deviant male. So any guy that comes out of the club and tries to access women or children in their spaces, let alone in private spaces, let alone in prisons or rape shelters or even in schools, they are a perpetrator yet to be busted. Or a predator. I guess technically a perpetrator is one that has been busted, but they're predatorial. So they're into horrible, well, we've all seen that, right? The progression of pornography. So behind that smile of that rainbow colored guy, guess what he's been accessing, and guess where his fingers are holding that child right now. He would never do that, would he? Jimmy Hinton's father was digitally penetrating the girls as he was baptizing them in one motion. That's how vile these individuals are. So that's the heart of darkness. You can't get much worse. You're digitally penetrating a child that you're baptizing.
Absolutely disgusting.
There we go.
And I encourage you guys to please follow Jon across all platforms. His Twitter alone has all of his links on it, so it's a really good place. I, of course, always put them in the show notes. But if you guys want to go follow him on Twitter, he does post daily. He puts what's new in the news. He puts what's new in his own world, if he's published something or if he's been on a podcast. If there's articles that stand out. I like his Twitter because I don't have to go look in the news to see kind of what's going on in these realms. Jon just posts it and I can go right to his page and see what's going on daily. So it helps cut the research in half if this is something that, you guys are spending time doing. You guys can just go on Jon's page and just read what's going on and don't have to spend the time searching. So it's really awesome that Jon does this for us. And you guys can see what podcast he's on, like I said. And anything new that he's publishing to any of his amazingly resourceful sites. His sites are just incredible too. So many hours of free material on there, you guys. I know some of you have been saying these Tuesday nights are like a therapy session for you. And if you're enjoying these Tuesday nights, please go on his websites and check out and his YouTube channels and go check out all of the free hours of education, courses in a sense, boundaries, forgiveness. I mean, Jon just covers all of it. So you guys can continue your journey, whether it's directly with him. He does have that contact button on his SurvivorSupport.net. So if you guys are looking for a helper to work with you, Jon can consult with you and help. So contact him. But if you're not ready for that step yet, or maybe if it's just not in the near future, start your journey by going down the videos on his website and get more comfortable and, ease into it. There's so much to learn. So please go check all of that out. I'll have it all in the show notes for you guys. No matter what site you're on my podcast, it lights up as a hyperlink. So just go in the show notes and click and it'll direct you right there. And from one of his sites, it's pretty easy to sort of get connected to the rest. So I really encourage you guys to please continue your journey learning from Jon. What he's doing here on the imagination is amazing, and it's just a small portion of all the free stuff that he puts out. So please continue your journey learning. I love when creators are out there giving us free stuff for us to learn. And then also, if you guys are able to support him, he has a donate button on his SurvivorSupport.net, as well as you guys can actually hire him for more in-depth personal services if you guys want to venture there. So please go contact him, connect with him, follow him, subscribe. It always helps us. This information does not freely get in the algorithm. So it's a big help whenever we can sort of help tip that needle a little bit by just a subscribe or a follow. So Jon, thank you again so much for coming on. It's such an honor to continue the series with you. I really do appreciate all the time that you spend on not just your personal work, that in itself is just a gold mine of knowledge that you have accumulated throughout the years and experience. And it's so invaluable at this point when more and more people are waking up. And it's just awesome that you've chosen to come out and share this publicly. You know, you could have easily stayed behind the scenes or even just not even bothered. And so just on behalf of everybody listening, on behalf of the community, I just want to really thank you for all the work that you do, because it's greatly appreciated and it's really making a difference.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your work. You are busy as all get out as well. I've seen how many episodes you're producing each week, and it's phenomenal. So thank you. Really, on behalf of all of us, thank you for making this time available. It really has helped me kind of get structured a little bit and focused on, okay, it's time to start dealing with parts and maybe put some material out there about psychopathy. So we will pick up. For those listening, we're going to start with the chart again.
Yay.
And this is where it's going to get exciting. We're going to get into the real deep work as far as the resistance and those parts that can present the most challenge sometimes, where it feels like. So we've dealt enough with psychopathy. How's that? So we're going to get back into working with the parts.
Really excited for that. That chart has been really fun to, sort of play around with, and you did an awesome job with it. So if people are just tuning in, tune back in next week or go back in the playlist that I have on my channel with Jon. I'll put that in the show notes too. Go back and listen to all of his episodes. They sort of all build off each other, even though you guys can listen to them all individually and then go back and pick and choose which ones you guys want to listen to. But I do encourage you guys to go down that playlist and listen, because it's a awesome resource. I've been sending this playlist to a lot of survivors that have been reaching out. I recently had a mother who lost her children in family court. She reached out and said she's been watching your videos, Jon, because it's not quite as traumatizing as watching survivor trauma testimonies. She can get the information she needs to help her kids heal one day without being exposed to some of the triggering details that some of the testimonies have within them. So again, I appreciate that. It's neat to see my podcast guests and, people actually going through really hard times, finding value in what you're doing and being able to help educate themselves. And, even that mother knowing her children are being abused, satanic ritual abuse with the father. She's one that lost her kids to a pedophile. So she's sort of preparing for one day when she gets to see her kids. Your episodes are helping her understand what her children, are going through internally and how she can be there for them. So super awesome, super valuable. And I really appreciate all you guys hanging in with us with this series. This has been awesome. We have like a little steady crowd Tuesday nights on YouTube. If you guys aren't on YouTube, come join every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. and Thursday and Sunday, same time. I always premiere episodes. Jon's episodes have a little cult following in a sense, an awesome group that shows up to get there. Yeah, it's awesome.
We fight against cults, except in this case, we're okay with the cult. No, I'm totally
exactly. Yes. I mean that in the best way. We have a really loyal group that shows up every Tuesday night to learn from Jon. They have their pen and paper and it's a great time. So come join us in the chat on YouTube. It's awesome. And I'm so grateful for you guys supporting. Means the world to us. We can't do this without you guys. This has been such a great journey to go down, and I appreciate you guys being supportive of all the new material that we have. And I encourage you guys, if this was of value to you, share with just one person. That's a way that you guys can help me out a little bit. And Jon, a lot of you ask, what can I do? Go do that. Just go share it with somebody that you think that this can help. Support me too on all platforms. I'll have all my links in the show notes too. Really grateful for you guys. We look forward to next Tuesday and any other days that you guys want to come tune in and hang with us. Super grateful for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time.
Radio. Here's our Becky Bruce with the very latest.
The new charges filed today from Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill involve 2 crashes, but 3 victims. One of those 3 is the story you heard first from KSL News Radio. It involved a hit-and-run crash into